Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify to the light, so that all might believe through him. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify to the light. The true light, which enlightens everyone, was coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world came into being through him. Yet the world did not know him. He came to what was his own, and his own people did not accept him. But to all who received him, who believed in his name, he gave power to become children of God, who were born not of blood, or of the will of the flesh, or of the will of man, but of God. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory as of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise
to you, O Christ. In John's Gospel I just read, we do not hear the usual Christmas story about Jesus' birth set some 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem, that baby in a manger. John paints the Christmas story with a big brush. He tells this story in cosmic terms. For in John we meet the Word, the Logos, who was present from the very beginning of time. The Word became flesh and now dwells among us, full of grace and truth. John's Gospel begins by echoing Genesis, in the beginning. This cosmic Christ spans the whole expanse of time and comes as the light which brightens the darkness of our world. Yes, in John, the Word become flesh fills our lives with grace upon grace. The Word become flesh opens our hearts and minds to God's divine love, shining a light within us that no darkness can ever overcome. Some years ago, Jay Grote, a Methodist pastor who happens to be the brother of my wife's childhood best friend, wrote a memoir reflection based on John's prologue of this, our gospel text for today. I think that Jay highlights well how Jesus dwelling among us lightens the darkness of our lives. Now, Jay wrote this little memoir to reflection in the first person, so keep in mind these are Jay's words that I'm going to share with you, not mine. They say you never forget your first time. My first time came when I was in the 8th grade, and it was with a girl named Tammy. We did it in the dark with about 100 other 8th graders on the junior high school gym floor. You see, Tammy was the first girl who ever said yes to me when I asked her to slow dance. I was afraid of girls. But when the band suddenly shifted from a fast song to a slow one, I mustered my courage, swallowed my heart, walked the dreaded social gauntlet across the gym floor, and asked Tammy to dance. I didn't know how to dance, but I knew I liked her. So we danced the cling and sway, two kids awkwardly holding on to each other, clinging and swaying in the dark, slightly offbeat to the music. I didn't know it then. Tammy and I were modeling life. Life is a dance of cling and sway, and of darkness and light. And some days we just swallow our hearts and go. In his gospel prologue, John writes that Jesus, the light of the world, has arrived. His light shines in the dark world, but the darkness does not overcome it. Or perhaps better, as the NIV renders it, the darkness has not understood it. John does not say that Jesus coming into our world means that the darkness dissipates or that we will not experience darkness. Light and darkness coexist. And whether we choose to stand wondering in the darkness or to venture bravely into the light is up to us. Jay goes on, the darkest day of my professional life occurred many years ago on a sunny afternoon when I was an associate pastor at a suburban church in Chicago. I was pulling weeds in the front yard. My wife leaned out the front door and told me that the senior pastor wanted me on the phone. Uh-oh, I thought. My boss was not the type to phone me at home on a Saturday afternoon without good reason. I picked up the phone. Meet me at the hospital, he said. Something bad has happened. I quickly changed clothes and drove to the hospital. Walking towards the emergency room entrance, I saw 10 ambulances, red lights flashing, and I soon learned that an elderly man had blacked out at the wheel of his car and drove full speed onto a baseball field. In a tragic instant, 3 8-year-old boys were killed and 11 more seriously injured. I found my way to the chapel, which was filled with panicked parents. The next thing I knew, I was hearing a shaking doctor tell 2 parents from our church that their 8-year-old son, their only child, was dead. The next morning, on Sunday, everyone, stunned with grief, and our congregation filed into the sanctuary for worship. Sitting in the front pew where no one ever sat were those 2 grieving parents. And that moment, the text was John's prologue. I knew the parents well, and I knew that they knew the church was the one place where they just might, find a single flicker of hopeful candlelight in a world gone utterly dark. I remember a line from the senior pastor's sermon that morning. The instant that beautiful young boy died yesterday, the first heart to break was God's. The 2 parents tearfully nodded as I watched from a seat behind the pulpit. We all cried that day. Life is a dance of cling and sway that alternates between light and dark. For the rest of their lives, the grieving parents would live with this struggle. That Sunday morning was a halting, shaky, single candle of light shining in the darkness that I will never forget. No one goes through this life without the pain of darkness. What we do with that pain defines our lives. That's where Jay ends his story. No matter what the pain of darkness, the light of Christ continues to light our path from death to life. Today, we celebrate the one who has come to be the light of our world and our lives. And I invite you to reflect on your own life's dance between light and darkness. I think back over 30 years ago when I first learned that my mother was diagnosed with an atrophy of her brain of unknown origin, bringing on an early onset of dementia. It was a long dance between the light and the darkness as she became more childlike and then eventually bedridden and non-communicative in a nursing facility. She died 20 years ago, but the light of her love still shines bright within me. We will never understand why events of darkness occur in our world. Yet without darkness, how could we ever fully appreciate the light? Poet pastor Steve Garnas Holmes, who you've probably heard me quote before, creatively weaves together this idea of Christ as our light with music and song. God begins with a musical idea and then sings it. The song shines in the darkness. Everything in this universe is God's song. It's a love song. In Jesus, we can hear the singing clear, sweet, and strong, like a mother's lullaby, holding her troubled child, a strange melody in a new key, but one that resonates deep in our souls because we too are God's singing. Listen for God singing the world into being. Look for the light shining in the music. Notice this cosmic song, this act of creation rising in you, unfolding, radiating, shining in your darkness. The true light that enlightens everyone continues to come into our world. It's a light that no darkness can overcome, ever. Merry Christmas.